I tell my students that when you work in politics and you get a chance to go down to the state capitol, U.S. Capitol, it's really a process of making sausage. And for those of you who are familiar with slaughterhouses or familiar with the process of making sausage, you don't want to see how sausage is made, but you sure love the end result if it's for you. But it is a process that gets very, very entangled in who controls the resources, who controls the wheel, what I call the political wheel, that works to control, which is dictated by the will of the people. Now, if politics is how individuals, the process of who gets what, when, and where, and how, then it creates what we call policy or law. And this actually dovetails into one of my three theories. It's the theory of laws and public policy. I believe that laws and public policy, which were created through the political process, are created for three reasons. Laws and public policy are created to control and dictate people, beliefs, and resources. You can take any law, any policy, any ordinance, any regulation, and place it within that theory, and it stands on all four. In addition to that, when those laws are created, it creates a second theory that I created, which is the pendulum of justice. If you're familiar with the pendulum swings to the extremes, extreme right, extreme left. However, it tends to go back and forth, not to the extremes, but kind of a little bit more until it settles in the middle. When you look at a case, for example, Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, the day before the Brown decision Brown 2, came down. Legalized school segregation in schools was constitutional. The day after the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1954, Brown 2, segregation in schools are now unconstitutional. So therefore, you see the extremes of that pendulum of justice swinging. However, back and forth, you don't see the implementation of integration or desegregation for years, decades, and in some cases, a half a century later. So now you see those forces moving the pendulum of justice back and forth. So the question becomes, what are those forces? One that we're going to focus on today is race. How does race play a part in the process of who gets what, when, where, and how? What are those other forces that are moving the pendulum of justice to effectuate the laws that are created through the political process? More specifically, I'll focus on, myself and the panelists, we'll focus on the economics of racial politics, the rights of race politics as it relates to civil rights for individuals in this country, and finally, how racial politics affects education.
Well,